Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you an interview I recently conducted with Naoki Yoshida, producer and director of Final Fantasy XIV. At the recent Endwalker media tour, I was given the opportunity to ask him a few questions, and now I'll share his answers with you. Special thanks to Aime for translating between us and the rest of the community and PR teams for assisting as well. With that, let's get started. So normally I tend to ask about a lot of features that we haven't heard about in a while, but with another live letter coming, I didn't want to ask much about PvP or crafting or gathering or Island Sanctuary. We've already heard a dozen and a half things about Ultimate, so I wasn't going to ask that question for the millionth time. So I decided to focus instead on questions that were reflective of either things that I didn't see in the Media Tour build or things that I did experience in the Media Tour build. So a lot more gameplay-oriented things here. But before we get to the first question, Yoshida himself had a request of all attendees at the media tour that we include a message from him somewhere in our coverage, and I'm including mine here. Yoshida would like to express his deepest gratitudes to all medical personnel around the world. They've been in the thick of it the last couple of years, to say the least, whether you're a first responder, a doctor, a nurse, anyone in the medical field who's out there putting their lives on the line to keep everyone healthy and safe. He gets messages from medical personnel all the time thanking him and the team for Final Fantasy XIV. When they have spare time, they play it, and it helps them get through those really hard days. But he's grateful to you. He wants you to know the amount of respect and the amount of gratitude he has for the incredibly difficult times that you have had, the incredibly difficult work that you've had to do. So Yoshida says, thank you to all medical personnel around the world. He wishes you happy, healthy, and safe, and I wish the same as well. With that, let's get to the first question. So for my first question, the team has made efforts to try and eliminate long pull countdowns before fighting a boss. In the Media Tour build, lots of skills like Perfect Balance and Mech Yoshi-P might encourage long countdown timers still. Is this intended, or are there any plans to adjust these skills? This was mostly in response to Perfect Balance because one of the openers I figured out does involve a pre-pull Perfect Balance. Whether or not that ends up being the best one, obviously, I don't know. We're going to need more eyes on it, but it definitely made me think about asking this question. And the answer I got, I don't know if it precisely answered the question about whether or not this was intended or if there's any plans to adjust these skills, but it did go into a little bit more of the thought process behind why they are designed the way that they are. And the big thing was that Yoshi-P stated they really don't intend every job to have their absolute best burst at the very start of a fight. Some jobs are designed to utilize future burst opportunities in the fight more efficiently than the first. So this allows more variety in how each job approaches a fight, as opposed to everyone feeling the same, and then things get kind of boring. They will of course watch how players take these changes and provide feedback for future adjustments. This is something that's kind of evident with some jobs in the previous expansions, and looks like it may still be prevalent in some jobs in Endwalker. I will say though that with the complete normalization of 60-second and 120-second burst and big burst windows, even with a few 90-seconds sprinkled throughout, that this kind of becomes a weird way of approaching a job. Because for Monk in particular, if you were to not pre-pull Perfect Balance, essentially your hardest hitting skill would never line up with the biggest burst that you do in a fight, which is every 2 minutes, which seems counterintuitive to me. I understand that not everyone has to have their burst at the start of the fight, but that's another thing to then say, oh, well, you'll have it at the weaker burst every single time, because once you land it there, outside of boss delays, you would have to land it on the 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, etc. in a fight. So I'm curious to see if this design maintains, or if this actually ends up being the way that Monk is just better to play. So he's a we'll see, and I guess I'm a we'll see as well. Now, my second question actually came right after the Reddit interview asked a question similar. I sat in with them, so we both had the same time to share to ask Yoshi-P questions. By the way, go check out their interview because they had some really good questions in theirs. But they had just asked about how certain skills interact with high ping players, and I had that as my very next question as well. So I figured it was probably a good idea, because the more questions they're getting about this exact thing obviously means that maybe the problem's bigger than just... I guess I should read you the question and the answer before I continue explaining. So my second question, many skills have been adjusted over time to make them more friendly for high ping players, such as Warrior's Inner Release stacks or Perfect Balance stacks. Some skills such as Hypercharge, Wildfire, and Blood Weapon still have tight buff windows that could be punishing if the player's connection is even slightly slower. How does the team decide which skills receive these kind of adjustments and which ones do not? So the answer is a mix of something that makes a lot of sense to something that kind of surprises me. So they said they look at a few different factors for this, including how a specific action may stress a player. For some skills, changing it to a charger status. So the part that makes sense to me is where they're talking about, analyzing how a skill may stress the player. That just makes sense, but the actual question was about the high ping and high latency stuff. And it seems to imply that they haven't received a lot of feedback in regards to Hypercharge Wildfire or Blood Weapon. And that surprises me because it feels like every day I'm having conversations about these specific skills and how they interact with anyone who has high ping. But maybe it's just not being presented in an official enough format like they said on the official forum. So if you have issues with these skills, go provide feedback, I suppose. Give them all the information they ask for, and hopefully they don't chalk it up to just packet loss occasionally. Because, I'm privileged. I got West Coast ping in NA, but I respect that some people would probably be better off if we adjusted these skills, and I figured I'd look out for them by following up the Reddit latency question with this one as well. Now, my next one was a bit of a fun one. Healers in the live game discuss how often they are casting DPS spells, giving jobs like White Mage nicknames to Glare Mage instead. The Mediator build has some new healing skills and even some new damage skills. Has the team noticed or taken any feedback on improving interactivity with healers, whether that be more interesting DPS skills or more prominent healing requirements? As for Yoshida's answer, kind of the expected one, but I do like to get updated perspectives now and again. Yoshida said he totally understands why high skill players desire more technical aspects to DPSing when they're playing healer. They are able to put out damaging skills very often between the healing that's required. That being said, they won't do any sort of dramatic addition of DPS skills to healers moving forward. New players shouldn't feel this immense pressure to deal damage on healing jobs because we force them to have a bunch of damaging skills. They should get their exhilaration from improving how well they heal, then consider if they have the time to DPS. He then added a reminder that, Sage is coming out. There is a healer now with a much greater focus on dealing damage since it heals a player as well. You can also time a bear to reward a damaging spell in return, talking about the Toxicon interaction, so players looking for a more involved DPS process might enjoy Sage a bit more. Like I said, this one's kind of by the books. We expect these kind of answers, but I'm always interested to hear if their perspective has changed because, they did add quite a few new skills to the existing healers, and they started doing this thing where their new utility skills and their new healing skills have a damage component to them. Now, the damage component doesn't seem to be any stronger than their normal damaging spells, but it's that encouragement of participating in both roles. If you see you have skills that deal damage but are also providing healing, then it might start get the gears turning. At least that's how I interpreted it when I saw some of the new skills. So I was wondering if maybe their perspective on things had changed and led to these types of skills existing, but I didn't really get any insight into that. So maybe next time I definitely will ask this question again sometime in the future. Now, my next one, definitely not about the Mediator build, definitely about stuff that we see on live. As many of you know, the Party Finder is plagued with posts advertising for sales of content or services not intended to be allowed in-game. Is the team aware of this, and are there any plans to combat it? So Yoshida had a very quick reply to this. He said, yes, they are aware of the rising number of posts in the Party Finder that advertise for activities that are not what the Party Finder is actually posted for. Basically meaning like you'll see duty roulette leveling and then it'll just have a completely different description for it. Some of these activities even exploit loopholes in the user agreement as well. So they are planning to update the user agreement so that they may deal with postings like that in the future. He said that he knows it seems like they should just enforce it now. They know about it, they could act against it, but he said that if their user agreement doesn't have clearer rules or they don't clean up these loopholes, that they would face rightful backlash from the players for being unclear about what is and isn't allowed. So they said they need to button up the user agreement before they do anything else, and they are hoping to do this soon. Now, Yoshi-P wanted me to make it very clear that by doing this, they are not looking to limit or restrict the types of content that players can do. They just want to make sure that in the case the Party Finder is being misused, that they have some grounds with which to attack these types of cases. So it was nice to get a direct answer to this because I feel like it's just kind of slipped as a topic. It feels like it's gone completely unnoticed, but almost any time you open the Party Finder nowadays, it's just a wall of like sales or mentoring or coaching or this is my Discord, DM me there. And it's too much. It used to just be a post or two, but now it's like the majority of the party finder at some times of the day or in the evening. So the fact that they're aware of it, the fact that they're preparing to do something about it, is good information to have. And my final question, which was not the final question I wrote down, but the only question I had time for by the end of it all, many skills in the game were adjusted to 60 or 120 second cooldowns for Endwalker. However, some skills still have a 90-second cooldown. Why has the team left some skills, such as Ley Lines or Monk's new Riddle of Wind skill, on these 90-second cooldowns instead of adjusting them to 60 or 120 seconds? Yoshida gave me a very elaborate answer for this. This is done for several reasons. First, if every ability was 60 or 120 seconds, then the jobs end up feeling too similar to one another. It's nice to have some abilities that you have to consider when to use them between those big burst windows, otherwise you might just get bored. Second, if they stack too many abilities during those 60 and 120 second timings, then some jobs just get way too busy, which may cause the player some stress. Now, those are the main reasons for the actual question of, why are some of the skills 90 as opposed to these new cooldowns. The rest of the time he spent talking about the actual designs of Riddle of Wind and Ley Lines. So as a bonus note, Riddle of Wind we initially considered to make the buff actually increase the speed of the monk even further, but it was too fast, so we made it an auto attack buff instead. I didn't ask anything about that, but listen, I've played 1.57 GCD Monk and Bostia, and I told him this a little bit later. I was like, trust me, monks, we can handle a little fast, just a little faster, but we'll get to that in a little bit. As for Ley Lines, Yoshida said that they had to consider the impact of that skill's cooldown a lot, and they have been since Shadowbringers even. Now they said if the skill was 2 minutes for its cooldown, then the pressure to use it efficiently goes up a lot. And since you have to stay in the space in order to get the buff, they were like, black mages just might choose not to move. Even if something dangerous is happening, they might just stand there because I can't waste this Ley Lines. It's every 2 minutes, it's so valuable. So they decided that wasn't going to work. Then they thought about it on the flip side, which was contemplating reducing the cooldown to just a minute. And then they determined that with the effect that it has right now, that probably wasn't going to work. On top of that, trying to encourage the Black Mage to just halt all movement so drastically so often just wasn't a healthy design choice. Then they considered other things, like adding a trait where the ley lines follow the player, or an ability that lets you slide the ley lines to you instead of you sliding to the ley lines. But then they just said it might as well just be Enochian at that point. You might as well just roll it into that. Something you press and then you just do your rotation without any sort of consideration. You're just stronger. So with all of that in mind, they kept it at 90 seconds. It can still be used as a mobility tool. It can be used as a damage buff, and it makes the skill just more flexible overall. Now that's when I said I've played Max Haste Monk and Bostia, so I know we can go faster, and Yoshida had a good laugh at that. He's like, yes, you can definitely go faster, but either way, they just think that everything being on 60 and 120 seconds would be less exciting. They don't want the gameplay to be so drastically different for players during those times either. So he's excited to see how players respond to the new skills, to the changes, and then when they get to try it for the first time, of course, they will be taking feedback and making adjustments. And that was a wrap for my interview. I had more questions written down. I'm not going to tell you what they were because I might save them for a rainy day. But yeah, that's what I got through. And it was good. I was glad I got to ask what I asked. And I kept it kind of relevant to the media tour and to the build itself. So hopefully we'll just see how these things pan out, if adjustments are needed, if some of my concerns or fears are validated or completely squashed. That'll be the fun of after all this media tour information is out, and also after the game itself is out and we have the full build. So with that, that is going to be a wrap for this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and be sure to browse around all the other interviews as well. I know I'm going to, because there might be a few topics in there that I really want to discuss. So we'll see how everyone else did with their interviews, all the various media and content creators and all that stuff. But anyway, thanks again. I'll see you all in the next one. And until then, take care.